Welcome to the Product Development Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Wakeling, and in this episode, I'm joined by Krish Ramineni, who is the co-founder and CEO of Fireflies.ai. Krish was a featured Forbes 30 under 30 and was a former PM at Microsoft working on the growth team for Microsoft Office. He's also passionate about PLG, or product-led growth, which is the main topic of today's conversation. So Krish, many thanks for joining the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Adam, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, maybe you can talk a little about your background first and introduce yourself a bit more than I did, and maybe touch upon your background at Microsoft and some of the key milestones that ended up you becoming a co-founder of an AI-based product.
Yeah, absolutely. I will start with my early journey right out of college. I was 21 years old. I graduated early from school. Had the opportunity to go be a product manager right out of school at Microsoft. Got to work with a whole bunch of different teams, learn how large organizations work, worked on some really cool projects related to natural language processing as well as customer voice. But I think the biggest realization for me as a new employee in the workforce was how much we are reliant on meetings to get work done, especially at Microsoft. If you wanted to do anything, people would say, let's get that on your calendar. That's a common catchphrase that people would use to have meetings. And I always used to tell myself, why is it that I can remember a conversation I had only a little while back and not something that I've had a long time ago? So I think a better way to phrase that is I've always wondered why I could remember an email I sent 2 years ago and search back to it. But if I had a conversation 2 hours ago, I forgot it because I've just had so many meetings. And that started the quest for wanting to have this perfect memory of every conversation I've had to help me be more productive, more creative. And I think that was the spark for Fireflies. And then fast forward, I left Microsoft. I was supposed to go to grad school at Cambridge, had about a month off. I flew over to New York to Boston to spend time with my co-founder of the time, where he was just graduating from MIT. And we were honestly just working on a bunch of fun projects. Again, the goal was to go to grad school at the end of the summer. But towards the end of that month, we realized this was way more fun working on product ideas and being really creative that we said, let's just go full time. We're in our early 20s. This is the time to do it. So he said no to Stanford. I said no to Cambridge. We went to San Francisco, set up shop, really bootstrapped the early days with little to no funding. And then spent like 2 years wandering in a desert, trying to figure out like a map for how to like build this product. And then fast forward to 2019, we had a prototype out. We raised our seed round, and then January 2020, we launched Fireflies. And the rest is the pandemic happens. There's an acceleration of AI and remote tools, and Fireflies was leading the forefront there. And we thought, look, the pandemic might be like this time where we're going to get the greatest growth. So let's try to do as much as possible. But the awesome thing about the way we built the company and PLG is that Fireflies is growing 10 times faster today than it did during the peak of the pandemic. And all of that credit goes to the virality and product-led nature of our company. But I will really say the catalyst, the spark for the fire, was during the pandemic, where people got to see the power of Fireflies and everyone had Zoom exhaustion and they needed a better way to record, transcribe, summarize, and organize all of their thoughts from their meetings. So that's probably a nutshell of like our last 5+ years of our journey, condensed down into a few minutes.
Great. Touching on the PLG side, obviously we'll come a bit later on to your specific journey and the tactics you've used at Fireflies.ai, but for people who aren't that familiar with product-led growth as a concept, can you just briefly summarize what it means, what it is, and when would you apply it into a business?
So product-led growth, it would be amazing if every business could support it naturally. Some businesses can do it better than others. I always say the counterexample, if you're selling enterprise security software, it's harder to do product-led growth there. You probably need top-down approval from the decision makers, the enterprises. Whereas if you have a collaboration product like Fireflies that an individual can get value from, and then the team can get value from. Those are great examples. I think it's a nice overlay of bringing that consumerization level adoption to the enterprise. So for us, product-led growth is about allowing people to experience Fireflies, try it, use a free version of it, go through a free trial, get value from it, swipe their own credit card, use the product, invite their teammates, and then over time, allow the organization to drive and adopt it. And your champions are your users inside of that organization rather than your sales team. You are literally product first rather than sales first or marketing first. And the bonus for product led is if you have a product that's also naturally viral and it spreads, that helps add fuel to the fire. And with Fireflies, meetings are just such a naturally viral place. You see Fireflies note taker on this meeting, you'll see it on other meetings, and people will ask like, hey, what is this? And then, oh, how can I get access to this? And then they'll get the meeting notes afterwards, and they're like, okay, I'm sold, I'm going to sign up. So people can experience Fireflies even before they sign up, and that gets a lot of folks excited. And then there's other parts to product-led growth, and this is just fundamental beliefs that we hold at Fireflies. One being, we're going to have transparent pricing on our website. We're not going to pay gate anything or paywall anything and force you to talk to a salesperson like a lot of other enterprises do. And I get the reason why those companies would do that, where they need to sell you at a very crazy high price point. So that gets me to the second point, where we're going to make it very affordable, very compelling and competing in the market. And you should feel like you're getting 10x value from this, where the price you pay is a no-brainer. And that's what a lot of customers feel. And so that way you're taking the pricing discussion off the table altogether, and you're just honestly allowing people to purchase the way they want. To me, that's the true definition of self-service, PLG, all wrapped up into just reducing friction everywhere along the journey for customers. And instead of selling, supporting them and being champions and advising them on their purchase path. So even though we have a sales team now that we've set up after the fact, most of the people that are coming in to use Fireflies, they're already convinced they want a platform like this. They just need more clarification or how to get this rolled out at an org level. And it's less about convincing them why Fireflies is the best platform for them. And that's really the essence of PLG.
So when you're thinking about B2B companies versus B2C companies, are there very different tactics? Obviously, traditional on the B2B side, you're separating the customer and the user segments out with very different underserved needs that you try and tick through various features and solving those problems. And when you think about the differentiation in product-led growth between those two quite different businesses, how do you think? Are they the same? Are the tactics quite different? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
If we think about the different functions of what a business would need. So if you're a sales-led company, you're going to need leads. You're going to need to maybe do outbound. You need to do marketing. You got to run ads. You got to be able to capture leads. And your KPI is how many demos can I get to my salespeople, right? You need to feed qualified demos. You have a different org structure, SDRs, AEs, and really your revenue is a function of like people, right? It's like coin operated is like the phrase that people put in. That's like sales oriented. If you are a prosumer, like consumer company, maybe it's all marketing, right? Like you don't even have any sort of sales or CSM function, but you're trying to go for getting people to buy in like the millions, right? And that's how a consumer company would operate. With PLG, you need a little bit of both, but the most important thing for us was building the product in a way where people can purchase themselves. And that's actually really hard in the early days. If you want to like get to revenue fast, sales is actually the fastest way to do it. There's no denying it, because you could have a relatively mediocre onboarding experience. You could have a pretty crappy product, but a good salesperson can gloss over all of that and sell the vision and convince people. When you're doing PLG, what you see is what you get. And if there's any issues, people are going to naturally point those out. So it's going to take, I would say, 15 months or so longer to get off the ground with PLG, because you have to actually make the onboarding good. You have to make the checkout process good, right? If you're a sales led, you don't even need to have like a checkout process. You just email them an invoice. So there's so many of these functions that change. And I think sales typically operates with this model of get the best people involved to sell a compelling vision. Being a product and engineering oriented founder, my goal has always been get the best product out there and let the product do the convincing, which is I genuinely think is harder, but it felt more comfortable for us because that's what our strong suit was. So different founders, different entrepreneurs will feel more drawn to a different path. One of the advantages of PLG is scale is a little bit easier. So it's harder to set up, but it's a little bit easier to scale over time because your system is not blocked by the number of people like that are operating, right? I always think that's going to be your biggest constraint. Where I think PLG companies also can spend more on R&D, less on sales and marketing, less on sales headcount, to be able to achieve some of that growth. And others will argue that, hey, PLG, it's after a certain point, all roads lead to enterprise. You've got to go to enterprise in order to make it successful. But I think there have been companies that have proven that you can still do PLG. You can add layering in. It's not like PLG, prosumer, SMBs, or enterprise. Naturally, though, PLGs are better oriented for small teams, small businesses, more of that sort of SMB segment of customers. Whereas enterprise, you're going to have more champions and stuff. But some companies like Slack, some companies like Dropbox, companies like Atlassian have blended that model beautifully, where you have PLG motion, and that becomes your like army of ambassadors that help make enterprise easier later when you get into it. I always believe that it's much easier to go from PLG to enterprise than enterprise to PLG, especially if you have a top-down selling motion. Building that freemium free DNA is going to be at odds with what your VP of sales will actually want. I've seen many companies where a VP of sales goes in and says, why are we doing this free stuff? Like, we should like not have pricing on our website. They need to talk to sales, and we need to focus on getting demos. And I get it. Like, they need to hit their quotas. They need to get like more leads through the door for their reps. But that is naturally at odds with what a freemium PLG self-service type company wants to do, right? Where they want to reduce as much friction as possible. So it just varies. Like, again, you can build really successful companies with either approach. Salesforce has built an amazing company with the sales-led approach. And then later they started acquiring some of these like smaller players in the market so that they could have a PLG SMB type offering. But I think more companies that are going to market, especially in this type of market downturn recession, are going to like have to think twice about headcount and pricing and packaging. And that's also really important for PLG, is like your pricing and packaging makes a huge difference. And most people, you can't go in and charge like enterprise level pricing and then expect people to swipe their credit card, right? So there's always pros and cons to doing each thing.
In terms of maybe some of the tactics around PLG, primarily you break things into three sections. So you have the acquisition, you have retention, and monetization. So maybe you could speak to tactics around each of those elements, and when you're applying PLG to a company or product, how do you think in those terms? What metrics are you looking at? What tactics are you doing to improve those metrics?
For acquisition, it's about how do you get the word across, and the best way for Fireflies is the more people use it, the more others see it. And when others see it, they're curious and they want to sign up. So a lot of our growth comes from people seeing it in action. So we drive like more people to want to use Fireflies, have it in meetings, and really every user, even our free user, is an ambassador, is marketing the product for us. So I don't think of our free users as a cost on our system. In fact, they're champions and evangelists, and we need to take good care of them. So that is a philosophy that we hold very true to ourselves here at Fireflies. Every customer matters, and who knows, like that free user could turn into a team user, which can later turn into an enterprise account. There's been some data that's been sent by Slack that some of their $100,000 plus contracts, a large majority of them, if not most of them, started out in that PLG motion. So maybe even on freemium. So that's the importance and power of PLG and acquisition, and treating your free users right. The second thing is around activation. One of the things you want to do is reduce as much friction as possible in the user journey. With Fireflies, it's really 2 clicks. You connect your calendar and then it joins your meetings. And then afterwards, you get meeting recaps emailed to you, and then you can click in and you can experience everything in the dashboard. So people come for the AI note taker, but then they realize what they're getting is this incredible self-updating knowledge management system. And it only gets better as you add more teammates over time, because your knowledge repository for your company grows. You can search back through all your conversations. You're able to have it fill out notes inside CRMs and Salesforce so that you don't have to do all of that manually. And that is also a very powerful, compelling factor for people because it just fits into their workflow. To me, activation is about like, how many steps does it take for me to just get value from it as quickly as possible without having to think about it, right? Fireflies is a fly on the wall. It sits on the background. It does its thing. When it comes to retention, engagement, and expansion and monetization, what we think about is there are certain places in time where a customer feels like they've hit value, where it naturally makes sense for them to pay for it, to get access to additional features, or to unlock more storage or unlock more utilization. And they may want certain types of team functionality that it makes them say, okay, we are truly a business user at this point in time, and we're going to pay for the product. So with PLG, and this is different from free trials as well, right? Like there's freemium and then free trials. Freemium will naturally mean that you have to play the long game with a customer before they become paid. Free trials, you have like a 14-day window, 7-day window, but you have to get to that value aha moment really quickly in those 7 days. And so those things are there. We do both because our philosophy, again, is allow customers to experience the journey the way they want. You want to be a free user, you want to do a free trial, do you want to talk to sales, or do you want to just go directly and purchase it? Like we give you all paths are available, and people naturally fall into those different buckets.
So I think particularly knowing what those aha moments are, because again, it's probably something that you need to really have that deep empathy with the user, because different people have different moments of the aha, and whether it's the customer side that they can manage their account in a certain way, or on the user side they have a experience with the product in some way. I mean, in terms of understanding and getting a deeper empathy with users and customers, what are some tactics that you think about and you employ to try and get to that level with really understanding those customer needs and what those moments are that are really going to win them over, and use that as a touch point to then say, oh, upsell to a little bit more?
This is something that I think a lot of companies haven't figured out, even the largest companies, because it varies and it matters based on the life cycle of the customer and the place they're in. I would say have telemetry, have tooling to understand what customers are doing, pay attention to feedback, actually talk to your customers. Are you building these workflows and designs and these customer journeys with what's in your head inside closed doors, or actually seeing the behavior of customers and the feedback that they're giving? Right. I think in a market where we're really the pioneers of a lot of the approaches, it's hard for us to go and say, let's just go look at what the other company is doing and then replicate that, because it won't work necessarily for Fireflies. Even with like our bot, like that joins meetings, like people never even heard about that when we started. They're like, what, you're going to spin up bots and join meetings? Like that sounds too crazy. That sounds too expensive. No way that's going to scale. Right. So it's something where you have to look from the point of view of, well, what's going to be the least friction point for customers? And then I was like, okay, then the best experience is having like a note taker. It's transparent. People can see it on the call. They can ask about it. And if they want to remove it, they can instantly remove it. So I start with the customer journey and the friction and pain points and transparency angle. And that changed the way we approach things. And so sometimes you invent solutions when you have actual problems that you want to solve. What's bad is inventing solutions for problems that people don't have. So yeah, focus on customers. I believe those that understand their customers the best are going to be the ones that win the market and beat out competition.
Yeah, I mean, other common challenges that people might face in implementing PLG into the business? You touched upon a few challenges there, and obviously a lack of data and a lack of understanding is kind of a universal thing, I suppose, in product development. But specifically to product-led growth, what are some challenges that people might expect when trying to implement either these freemium or these kind of, focus on the individual, then moving to team and then enterprise potentially? What are some common roadblocks along the way?
I alluded to this earlier, but revenue takes a much longer time with PLG. Are you okay with selling $5, $10 per seat licenses and waiting years to get to a revenue target? Or do you want to be a company that sells 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 seat licenses to a few customers? Ultimately, do you want to support a lot of customers, or do you want to support a few customers that are high paying? Do you want something where acquisition becomes a little easier over time at scale because so many people are using it? Or are you okay with spear hunting and picking out specific customers and having a large sales cycle? My philosophy was that I did not want to have a long sales cycle. I want to get to value fast, even if people are paying less. It was all about volume and affordability, because ultimately the way you build the best products is when lots of people are using it and you have a fast iteration cycle. And the only way you get to a fast iteration and feedback cycle is when you have lots of different feedback coming, right? Instead of from 10 companies, you're getting feedback from 1,000 companies. Do you want to build a really niche product for a specific vertical, specific sector? Or do you want to build more of a horizontal product where now you're going to have to cater to every single use case? And maybe there are times when your product is a little too broad. And how do you zoom in on that? So there's always like the go-to-market will also determine the type of product that you build and the decisions you make, whether it comes to monetizations or product roadmap. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is they feel like they can build the product first and then later figure out go-to-market. Both of those things have to happen in one go. And I think a lot more product managers that are getting hired right now are being assessed for that skill of how do you think about go-to-market? How do you think about data? I just don't want your ability to spec great products and design great products, but how are you actually going to go to market with this? Because at the end of the day, the best product doesn't always win. That's the sad reality. The company with the best distribution is going to win. And the company with the most unique hook to get that distribution is going to win. And PLG is all about distribution and getting that hook and that aha moment as quickly as possible. So for us, we want to do both. We want to build the best product possible where people go, wow, this is insane. This is game changing. And that leads to that word of mouth, that leads to the positive Twitter and LinkedIn tweets where people are saying Fireflies is changing their lives, right? I'm going to be honest, like when I use it, I was like, yeah, this is powerful, but I didn't know we were going to go out and like make people feel so compelled to say like, this has been the single biggest productivity gain I've had in the last 2 years. And I see like, posts like that, which is really motivating. But that's because we've been so maniacally focused on making sure that end user experience is fantastic and making sure that the value you get versus the price you pay is 10x.
So using this example, moving forward into a bit more understanding of how you applied PLG into Fireflies, you can touch upon about some of the tactics that you employed right from the beginning, maybe at the point of MVP, if you kind of went that route, and what that looked like and how you scaled into a more mature PLG product that it is today compared to what it was back in 2020. If we can call it mature, maybe not, but
yeah, when we launched in January 2020, we had a product that could handle some volume, but not the volume that you would expect during the crazy cycle of the pandemic. So we've had to re-architect, rebuild our platform multiple times over. And that's kind of the challenge that a lot of consumer companies also face, right? Imagine like Facebook, the billions of messages that they're having to handle, the billions of images that they have to handle. So scale is a different challenge for PLG companies versus enterprise companies that are not necessarily supporting lots of customers. I'm talking about enterprise startups where the volume is not necessarily as high. You don't have to think about scale from day one. With Fireflies, we had to do it, and we had to take Band-Aid-like solutions, which didn't really work, and then we had to re-architect it. The thing I always say is once you turn the water on and you need to go fix a leaky pipe, you can't turn off the plumbing. You can't turn off the water, right? So make sure you're aware of what you sign up for, because once it starts, you can't stop. and you have to go detect the problem and solve it without impacting existing customers. And that's really tough. And some people aren't oriented for that. And it's stressful. It's going to lead to like nightly calls and like fires that need to be addressed. But that's what it feels like, when you have product market fit and there's hair on fire. The infrastructure level challenges cannot go unrecognized because it is massively time consuming. It's draining. And so if you want to be a bootstrap founder, don't want to raise a lot of capital, maybe the easiest thing to do is have a few customers that pay you a lot and easier to manage and scale, right? But you may have to spend that money now instead of on infrastructure. You have to spend it on ads and sales, commissions, etc.
So obviously scalability is an issue, particularly with this type of product. But in terms of the actual core feature set of the product, is the version that you released in 2020 quite similar to what it is now? Is it, how did you arrive on the first version? Was it very much an iterative approach, or did you kind of go with the bang straight away and said, no, this is what we're going to bring to market in its fully fledged form, and it's done service since then?
It's a combination of both, but Fireflies that is in 2023 versus Fireflies in 2020 is probably 20x better, both in terms of the quality of the product, the user experience, the transcription accuracy, the quality of the summaries, the incorporation of LLMs into the output. I honestly think 2020 was about selling a vision of what could be, and 2023 was about making that vision a reality. It's where the rubber hits the road and people go, wow, I see it now. You're crossing the chasm and you are getting mainstream adoption. You're getting mainstream recognition. And it's because we were able to execute as a team to get to this place where the quality of the product actually fulfills that thing. It actually takes notes like a human would. It actually can paraphrase and write bullet point notes down. It can create action items. It can actually help me search through an entire meeting, and I can just ask it questions like, oh yeah, what year was Fireflies launched? And I can just get an answer to that instead of having to read an entire transcript or listen to an entire call or read the notes. So for us, there's been massive shifts over time. There's no single silver bullet. It's just continuous iteration improvement. But I will have to say that the generative AI and LLM wave that's happened over the last year and a half, we've definitely benefited from that. And it's also helpful that we've been able to work very closely with OpenAI. Our investors were early investors in OpenAI, so we started that partnership quite early. And it's been transformative for us about how we strategically improve the product over time. Now, I would almost say that it was better for us to do this like long 3-4 year journey to get to where we are, because we had to build out all the fundamentals the right way. The SaaS platform, the payments, the pricing, the end user adoption, the Teams functionality, and so forth. There's a lot of companies now that are coming out of these accelerators where they're just GPT wrappers. And I hate using that word, but it's the truth that all the VCs talk about is what's differentiating you besides using some UI layer on top of OpenAI. And I think that's really important for most businesses to do because they need to get to market fast. So they went with the hook, but didn't build out the rest of the business. So I felt like because we did all of the hard work and all of the training, this part of the process was a little bit easier. And we were able to gain from that and really take advantage of that because there is more to Fireflies than just LLMs.
You see thousands of new AI products being launched every couple of months. There's just so much saturation in the market. And I think you make a good point about the idea of just this wrapper around, I think, as you alluded to, solving problems that exist. I think that's a key part of it, and building a robust infrastructure around that. However, on that point, I'm keen to get your thoughts on, from your perspective for Fireflies.ai, how you can compete with some of the big guns that are coming into the market. Obviously, Google, that they want to have a good market share of most of the AI stuff, as does Microsoft and others. So how can a smaller company with a PLG focus compete with these corporate enterprises, which are just going to dominate just because of pure money that's being put behind them?
That's a great question. And we think about it from the perspective of the market. And again, even in video conferencing, there is no one winner in the video conferencing space. There's no one winner in a lot of the application layers. The way Fireflies is going to be valuable for folks is it becomes your chief of staff. It becomes that assistant that's able to do work for you on your behalf. Joining meetings is just one part of it. Taking notes for you on those meetings and summarizing it is one part of it. Allowing you to have perfect memory and search and remember everything is another part of it. But I think there's a bigger picture that we need to look at, which is most of these companies have many problems to solve. So Microsoft is going to have to go make sure that their experience with Word and PowerPoint and like all the AI stuff they do there has to work seamlessly. Whereas for us, our deep focus on meetings, conversations, calls lets us go several layers deep and move at a rapid rate. That's the advantage of being a small startup that's being really efficient, where we're well capitalized and have the resources and talent. We're a 100-person company where we can go deep and solve those problems for customers in a better way. That's the genuine belief you have. Otherwise, you shouldn't be in the business of building startups. The second thing is many of these companies are walled gardens. So your Microsoft assistant may not go and join your Zoom meetings or work with Salesforce or work with some of the other platforms. Whereas Fireflies is ubiquitous, where it'll capture your Teams calls, Zoom's calls, Google Meet calls, and you don't have to change your workflow for that. You don't have to go like do 20 different clicks to enable that. And if you could be a Teams user and you want your notes logged into Salesforce instead of Dynamic CRM, which is a Microsoft product, you can do that. If you are using G Suite and Google Meet, but then you want it sent to Slack instead of like your Google Workspace, you can do that. So there is this idea that we're building apps and agents through Fireflies. And I always like to say that the Fireflies note taker is just one app on top of this conversational platform that we're building. So it can take notes for you, but it can also write up your emails after the meeting. It can create a project spec for you. It can create a draft for your next podcast based on the topics you brainstormed. It can fill out your CRM for you. It can analyze your recruiting calls and tell you more insights about your candidates. So the things that your secretary, chief of staff, or your teammate would do, I want everyone to think of Fireflies in that angle, rather than just like another software layer, another piece of UI. And when you go in with that approach, the sky is the limit. And there's just such a blue ocean of opportunity to tackle that even as competitors start thinking about this stuff on the lower end of the market, and then you have some of the big fish that are trying to work and do the things there, you can create a really strong, compelling product that fits deeply into what customers need.
I mean, you alluded there to the Blue Ocean, and I've read Blue Ocean Strategy before, which is a really great book for anyone who hasn't read it. But do you think in that mindset as well? Do you leverage a bit of that framework? I mean, in terms of your PLG model at Fireflies, do you have a specific development framework? You know, whether it's lean, whether it's whatever else it could be. What do you leverage, or is it your own concoction of various frameworks?
Yeah, I'm less framework oriented. I'm also less overly process oriented. I think one of the reasons people love working at Fireflies is because we try not to force process down their throat as much as possible. And instead, we're problem driven and we're passionate about problems, product areas, innovation, and we're technology driven. So how do you match amazing new technology to a compelling problem and go solve that? And you needed the right balance of it. Sometimes you don't want to build technology for the sake of building technology because it's cool, but we're very problem oriented. And then we like hiring smart people that are put on a problem and then can go solve it end to end. So you may see a designer, a product person also contributing on marketing and go to market strategy launches. So I feel like we want to create owners and we want to be able to go tackle exciting problems and see things through to the end. And creating owners inside our company is such a big part of enabling someone to feel excited about the work they do every day. You're not doing a small component, but you are really working towards like the bigger picture. The things that we like to focus on really are, hey, is what we're building scalable? Is what we're building affordable? Is what we're building simple enough for a user to understand? All right, like can a fifth grader or a sixth grader understand this and use it, right? Like that sort of level. Even though we're selling to businesses, people don't have time to sit down and figure things out or read a manual or hop on a sales call. How do you make it so that it's seamless? So those are kind of like the paths that I try to look at. And then the other pathway is, does this have the opportunity to change people's lives in a very large, significant way? And maybe changing their lives starts with taking away some of the burden they have to manually do every single day. And that is your way to be able to say, okay, you're not a vitamin, you're a painkiller. And so that's how we like to optimize it. I guess you can say it's a framework, but it's really a way of thinking about building products around the problem.
So, just to kind of bring everything together a bit, if you were going to recommend PLG to a particular company and you want to break it down into its core components in a kind of logical order that they should think about in terms of implementation, and what does that look like? Where's the starting point? Where does it kind of end up? And what are the points in the middle? Without going into too much detail, but just the key components that they can think of in terms of a application of PLG.
Who's your customer? How would you want them to experience your product? What checkpoints or guardrails are there in place before you can get to that customer? Do you need to go through IT? You need to go through security? You need to go through your CIO? Or can it be something that they just try out in like a small instance? A lot of great developer tools are like this too, where a developer can just start using it and then later they can get their org to purchase it. So it just really depends on like who your customer is. That starts with that. Who are you picking? Like that's half your battle is figuring out who you're building for. And the other half of it is how you're going to deliver it to them. And then through that process, you figure out what it is that you need to deliver to meet those expectations. So it's about opportunity recognition and fulfillment more than anything else. And the framework I would also say is, well, how do you plan to make money around this? How do you plan to charge for this? What are your costs? And you just have to kind of go through that process. But it all starts with picking the customer, understanding the customer's journey, life cycle, purchasing habits, need, appetite. Because you could build a really great tool that really doesn't solve enough of a problem for you to justify paying a lot of money for it, right? Versus there are other tools that are super simple, but they are charging lots of money because of the value it is to the organization. So what is the value to an individual? What is the value to the organization if you're doing B2B? And how can you get it to into their hands? And then, okay, you're going to find your first 10 customers. Great. You're going to do things that don't scale. Great. How do you plan to scale that to the next 100? How do you plan to scale that to the next 1,000? Do you have a plan around how that's going to happen? Is it going to require sales? Is it going to require marketing? Is it going to require viral hacks? Is it going to we used to hear this word growth hacking all the time, right? But now you don't hear it as much. But how do you think about distribution at the end of the day? So to think about PLG, start with the customer, start with your pricing, start with the product you're going to deliver, and then how you're going to scale that up in terms of COGS, and then how you're going to scale that up in terms of distribution.
So you alluded a little bit earlier on to product-led sales, which is the kind of extension of product-led growth to bring an actual sales team to talk to customers. What is the point that you say, okay, let's bring in the sales team. We've got the product-led growth. We've hit a certain amount. Is it a revenue number? What is that? When is the right decision to bring in the PLS side of PLG?
We started PLS pretty late, and that was a function of us realizing, are people getting the full value out of the product? And maybe product-led growth is getting to them to a certain checkpoint in the journey. And you ask yourself, can we accelerate that, continuing to be PLG? Or in order to unlock that next step function of value, you need to have some sort of human assist, right? I wouldn't even call it sales, but yes, this is PLS at its roots. And understanding like where in that journey can you activate more value for your customers. So I don't think it's about revenue. I don't think it's about how many customers you have. It's really about what stage of the journey are the customers in, and are they using your platform to the full potential? And if not, like what are things that you can do to enable them to do that? And naturally, if you enable them to do that, there's a great monetization opportunity as well.
So my understanding of particularly the PLG to PLS side of the funnel is it starts off with the user on the website. Let's say if it's a SaaS product, let's say they use the product, they become a user, they then become a product qualified lead, which if there's enough of those leads, they then form a product qualified account, the PQA. of which then can be pushed over to the sales side of the business to kind of intermingle with the MQLs, the marketing qualified leads, and hopefully be an opportunity for that salesperson to follow up. So is that correct? Is that the case? Is that a typical PLG to PLS kind of funnel that looks like in that way?
Instead of a marketing qualified lead, you'll have a product qualified lead that is at a certain place where they've reached that aha moment or is ready to be sold to, I guess. That's one way to look at it. Or the way we look at it is like they can unlock more value, right? That's the sort of thing. So companies do it in different ways. Some companies say like, okay, you've gotten enough value, now come talk to us to unlock more value. Or in our case, it's like, hey, there's a lot more value. It's at your fingertips, it's available, but it seems like you haven't seen it yet. Maybe I can help push you in that direction.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's a good point to finish on. I think before we go too much into the PLS world and have a whole new podcast on our hands. So, Krish, it was great to have you on, and I think it's a really great overview of PLG and how you applied it at Fireflies as well. So, where can people find you in terms of yourself and your company?
We're trying to be a little bit more active on socials like LinkedIn and Twitter. So you can look up Krish Ramineni on both those platforms and you'll be able to find me. Also post some product related stuff on Instagram. So Krish Ramineni there. Across all the handles is the same handle. And if you want to try Fireflies, use it, see it for yourself, you can go to fireflies.ai and get started for free.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And yeah, speak soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
You've been listening to the Product Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a follow on your preferred podcast platform and share with your colleagues. It's really appreciated and helps the podcast grow into the future. I'll see you in the next episode.